Beloved and friends, we have gathered in the name of Jesus of Nazareth for worship. You exist to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. You exist for worship. Worship is only possible for sinners when there is a means to be made right with God the Holy. We have gathered in the name of Jesus for worship. This passage exists so that you would trust in Christ in life and in death. It is here revealed for us so that we would gather not because we feel like worship, but that we would gather so that our feelings would calibrate to reality. You know, it's interesting, much of the world, and perhaps even us, often, we run to things like entertainment for joy. Entertainment literally takes us out of reality. And when you live in a world filled with war, disease, death, it's hard to be in tune with that reality, recalibrating to that reality, and finding joy in it. But we are a unique people in the planet. We gather to recalibrate on reality, truth, reality that changes everything and gives us joy. This should be the purpose of our gathering, the essence of our worship. We have gathered for worship. And today we have before us Matthew chapter 28. The events recorded in this chapter revolutionize reality. Listen, that's a massive statement. We should just stop right there, process that for a few hundred years. What happens in this chapter revolutionizes reality. It turns it all around. It changes every reference point. It gives you new lenses to see, to process, to understand, and to respond. It changes how you feel pain, how you look at death, and how you die. This contained right here in these precious words, well, they complete Christianity. The events here in chapter 28 complete Christianity, and they punctuate it. They punctuate its promise. They punctuate its power. They punctuate its central emphasis. Without the events in this chapter, our faith is futile, and the world is without hope. But with them, everything changes. You know, several profound realities have been well attested in the book of Matthew. It's called the Gospel of Matthew, the good news of Jesus, meaning that it's not the gospel that we talk about Christ died in our place. It's the gospel account, the good news of his life. It's the testimony, the evidence, the witness. Matthew has been spending 27 chapters witnessing the life of Christ, telling us of many and profound realities about Jesus. But you know, the events in this chapter are those distinctly set apart to show that the person and work of Christ give us good news. These events in this chapter distinctly set apart the person and work of Christ to give us gospel, to give us good news. It really is the dawning glory of the gospel itself. So I've called it Gospel Genesis. And what I mean by Genesis is the meaning of that word describing origin, beginning, birth, start, dawn. This chapter presents the birth of the gospel, the hope of the world, the good news of the ages. It is the climax of the Gospel of Matthew. It's the climax of the account of the life of Christ. And it is no coincidence that the climax of the testimony is the dawning glory of the ages. The reason he came, the fulfillment he achieved, is all put before us on display. And the goal is that a reader would see these words and respond rightly in spirit and truth, called worship. Responding in spirit and truth, meaning that which is revealed as true, empowered by the Spirit to see it, that you respond with worship. That's the purpose of our gathering. That's the purpose of the text. So I want to ask you to look with me. We have right here in the reading that we have heard, Matthew 28, 1 through 15, we have several observations on the genesis of the gospel in three distinct scenes. Each of the scenes are marked out by a key word. You can see it in the English. Behold. Behold. I love it when the Holy Spirit does that, right? Because it's like he says, okay, here's what I want you to see here, and then I want you to see here, and then I want you to see here. Behold, behold, behold. There's three of them. We'll look at them one at a time. Each of them show us something of the genesis of the gospel. Number one is the empty tomb. The empty tomb. And you can see that. Oh, I don't have any slides. That's fine. You'll have to just remember that. Empty tomb. Number one, you'll find it right here in verse 1 and 2. Now, after the Sabbath, toward the dawn of the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to see the tomb. Now look at this verse 2. And what? Behold. So this is a scene we should see. Very significant. All attention is drawn to it. And behold, there was a great earthquake. For an angel of the Lord descended from heaven and came and rolled back the stone and sat on it. You know, this passage, it presents evidence after evidence. It's angling with evidence. Everything here is screaming at you, look and see, look and see. The evidence is there, look and see. And it's continuing from last week. There are many witnesses. Even an earthquake is a witness. Even a stone is a witness. There are many witnesses. Some of them are unwitting, like the guards, like the women. It's interesting. An earthquake happens. Matthew's the only one who wants to record that because I think it fits his purpose as well. Do you remember in chapter 27 when Christ died? Verse 51, do you remember that? Where it says there was an earthquake. A statement of the judgment of God, a statement of the power of God, and it's a witness. But here, this earthquake is accompanied by something else. An angel. An angel of the Lord. And it says in the text, the grammar is pretty clear here, and it comes out in the ESV, for an angel. That's a causative. The reason the earthquake happened is because it was an angel. An angel of the Lord. And right here I stopped and thought, this is interesting. Everything in this chapter just stresses evidence, evidence, evidence. And you know the claims of Christianity today that are most attacked in liberal circles? The two pillar claims that are most attacked. Number one is the virgin conception or virgin birth. Number two is the resurrection from the dead. Now, it is no small thing. It is no coincidence that the virgin birth was announced by an angel and that the resurrection is announced by an angel. It seems that when these monumentous realities that exceed human capacity to relate, when these types of things, matters that are not open to human experience, when these types of things happen, God reveals by intelligent, clear communication by a divinely appointed heavenly being, a messenger from the Lord. They have to be there to explain what's happening because the human being cannot come to the right conclusion. Mary has never known a man, but she's pregnant. A man was just crucified, laid in a tomb, and he's not there. And both of these attest to the person and to the work of Jesus. Now, this angel happens to sit on a stone. It says, the text says very plain, he rolled back the stone and sat on it. And it's an interesting thing because the tenses are fun right here. It's like vivid. It's like you're watching, those cinematic where it speeds up and then it slows down in slow motion and then it comes in fast. It's like that. It's this business of he having come down, he then came over and rolled back the stone as though that sped up, and then active, vivid, he's actively sitting on it. All the stress in the tense here is that, he's sitting on it. He's there sitting on it, which tells us a few things, but I think the main thing we should just take away is that if this was a disc stone that covers a tomb, he's not sitting on a little 6-inch ledge. I think it's pushed off, and he's sitting on it as though to say, this isn't functional anymore. And I'm from on high to testify, no little piece of rock will stop the plan of God. There's a bit of, victory being pronounced in his manner. Blomberg says it this way, perhaps it indicates a note of completion and triumph. I think he's right. It's been said by many, and I think it's true, that, the stone wasn't moved to let Jesus out, but to let the witnesses in. I think I'd like to phrase it this way, maybe, that he moved the stone to let not Jesus, but the news out. It was to let the news out. And the reason I say it that way is because there's no indication that the moving of that stone was the way Jesus got out. All the grave clothes are still there. Like in the place where he lay. Like he didn't unravel them. Something happened supernatural. You can't explain it away. J.C. Ryle nails it when he says, we need not suppose that our blessed Lord needed the help of any angel. When he came forth from the grave, look, we need not for a moment doubt that he rose again by his own power. But it pleased God that his resurrection should be accompanied and followed by signs and wonders. It seemed good that the earth should shake and a glorious angel appear when the Son of God arose from the dead as a conqueror. Here's the emphasis, beloved and friends. It's an empty tomb. The earthquake testifies. The stone testifies. The angel testifies. There's an empty tomb. Verse 3, it says something about this angel. It says that his appearance was like lightning. We use that in English when we say things like, oh, you look striking. Well, think about the verb striking. Okay, you got it? Striking. It's kind of like that. It must have been captivating. It must have been something profound, something just otherworld, something supernatural, something beyond points of reference. We can't what are you? That's amazing. and his clothes white as snow. It's the whitest type of color that could be referenced in the ancient world was this purity of pure white. We are told by the other gospel accounts it was gleaming white. There's something here of radiance and glory. It's a heavenly portrayal. Verse 4, for fear of him, the guards trembled. This is no little cherubim. This is someone who, in fact, the text makes it even more clear than the English. It's not just that they trembled. The word there is used seismos. It's the same word we get seismic for an earthquake. In fact, guess what? It's the same exact root word as what was used in verse 2 about the earthquake. So the earth quaked and the guards quaked. The earth trembled and the guards trembled. It was seismic. It was no little disturbance. They were overwhelmed with indescribable fear. And these are men you wouldn't want to mess with. These are not your average guys. Roman soldiers. Charles Spurgeon, I think, nails it when he says, it took a great deal to alarm a Roman soldier. They were inured to all manner of terrors. They had thick, thick skin. But this angel's flashing countenance and snow-white raiment paralyzed them with fright until they swooned away and became as, well, what does our text say? Look at it. And became like dead men. And you've got to chuckle at a bit of the humor of God. Isn't Jesus the one that's supposed to be dead? And these guards are like dead. It's almost like a picture of the world. You see, Jesus is actually the dead who is living. But most people are living, yet dead. The picture here is quite interesting because they became dead. They were terrified, which is understandable, and they became like dead men. And why I find that striking is because these men manifest no faith. You see, they witnessed Christ's death. They witnessed his burial. And now they witness the resurrection, or an empty tomb at least. And there's no faith there. Only death. Only fear. But notice what happens in verse 5. But, and don't miss that little word, because it's a strong adversative. It's saying in contrast to. But the angel said to, wait, stop right there. Whoa, time out. I find it interesting. It's as though Matthew wants us to see that the angel had just complete disregard for these fellows and turned all his attention to the only people who were seeking Jesus. It says, but the angel said to the women, as though, again, I'm not going to speak to the guards. They're terrified and they're like dead men. I'm going to speak now to these women. And what is the first thing they say? Do not be afraid. Well, because fear would be the natural response to this sight. But the key is, do not fear is announced only to those who fear God. Did everyone hear that in this room? When an angel says, do not fear, that's only given to those who fear God. Those who do not fear God ought to fear when he sends a messenger and an earthquake and he rocks your world with something supernatural. You ought to fear. It's a sign of divine power. But we have known that, like in Luke chapter 1, verse 30, the angel said to Mary, do not be afraid, Mary, for you have found favor with God. God has been gracious to you. Don't fear when God has been gracious to you. Luke chapter 2, verse 10, and the angel said to them, fear not. These are to the shepherds, right? Fear not, for behold, I bring you good news of great joy that will be for all the people. Well, that's just like right now. You who fear God, fear not. Isn't that striking? Or is it just me? The men in this world who are fearless are the ones who fear and are like dead men. And the angel says nothing to them. Yeah, go ahead. That's exactly the way you should respond. But these little women, outcasts, weak, nobody fears them. And they fear everything. And they come up. And the angel says, no, I'm going to turn my gaze to you. Do not fear. Do not fear. Oh. And the you here, when he says, for I know that you seek Jesus. The angel says, I know that you, I find that incredible. The angel knows what they're doing. That's something supernatural itself, but they know why they're coming. And I find it interesting because the emphasis is all on you. I know you. I know why you're coming. You're seeking Jesus. Spurgeon comments that, let the soldiers tremble. Let them lie as if dead through fright. But fear not ye, for I know that ye seek Jesus, which was crucified. Those who seek Jesus need not fear. Well, it goes on and says, who was crucified? And there's something interesting there in the language, who was crucified. I know that you're seeking Jesus who was crucified. And it's the way it's presented is as though he was in the past crucified and forever will be crucified. As though he's in that state now, as though you're looking for a crucified man instead of one who is alive and risen. I think there's a bit of a gentle reproof here. It's a statement, you should know. You should know who you're looking for. You should know who you're looking for. He's no longer crucified. It's a fantastic scene. Verse 6, he is not here, for he has risen. We're told by the other accounts that he said, why are you looking for the living among the dead? He's not here. Now, I love this. Look at this last little bit. As he what? Said. As he said. I love here what happens with these angels, or this angel here. He doesn't just rebuke, he doesn't just reprove, but I love what he does. Doesn't say, oh, shame on you, you should have known better. But instead, what? He gently deals with their frail understanding and points them to trust in the words of Jesus. He told you, trust in what he said. Trust in him. It's a call for faith in the words of Christ, to believe on the basis of words, not to believe on the basis of sight. Isn't that what happens later in the same situation? 1 week from right now, from this day, 1 week, there will be one of his disciples, Didymus, or the twin, or Thomas, as we know him. And he's there, and Jesus says, do you believe because you have seen? Blessed are those who believe who do not see. You see, this is the issue here. Believe according to his word. He said he would rise. You should believe that. Jesus always keeps his word. Always. So now we see here, I love this. Like I said, everything's screaming evidence. So the angel says, you should trust his word. Let me help to fortify you. He's not doing this for antagonists or skeptics, but he's doing this for ones who believe. Let me fortify you. Come here. See? That's where they laid him. He's not there. In fact, if you look close enough, the other accounts will tell you, the clothes are still there. You see? He rose from the dead. And you know what? All of us, it's just fascinating to me. We've heard this already. We know this, and it can be to our disservice because we should just fall off our chairs. There was a man crucified. He was killed, and he rose from the dead. He rose from the dead. Do we Christians get excited anymore that Christ rose from the dead? Right? He's no longer there. This is something profound. The angel wants them to see. Look at the evidence. Just look at the evidence. Verse 7, then go quickly and tell his disciples that he has risen from the dead, and behold, he is going before you to Galilee. Oh, there's so much here. I'm going to wait for next time to finish that because the Galilee bit is very, very pregnant. It's all about, you got to wait. You got to wait. Very vivid, very important, and it's touching back to what he has already promised them and something that he will finalize in fulfillment. But for now, go there, go tell them, go there, and there they will see him. See, I have told you. I love it because he said you should believe what Jesus said. And now he's saying because they're trembling and this supernatural appearance of this angel, and he's saying, no, I just told you, so learn from this lesson, take the message of the words of God. Verse 8, so they departed quickly from the tomb, they obeyed, and they departed with fear and great joy, and they ran to tell his disciples. We'll come back to that in a moment. So now we have our second observation. The first is to behold the empty tomb. The second is to behold the risen Jesus. Look at verse 9. And what? Behold, Jesus met them. This is beautiful. He met them on the way. Matthew gives us this insight, this view, the only one. And he said something to them. He said to them when he met them, "Karete," literally, be glad. Be glad. Oh, I love it. I just love it. I mean, think about all the things he could have said. All the things he could have said. The first things out of his mouth. Be glad. Be glad. There's something here of indescribable, exceeding joy. And Jesus is so tender through it all. There could have been rebuke, there could have been reproof and all that, but instead what we see is it seems that he's encouraging them and comforting them even. And this is why. Listen to the words of Mark. At this point, Mark helps us to see a little bit more about these ladies at this moment in time. It says this in Mark 16:8. And they went out and fled from the tomb, for trembling and astonishment had seized them, and they said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. So clearly, there's more fear here than we might estimate. And it's as though Jesus intercepts them. And very gently, be glad. Be glad. And they came up and took hold of his feet and worshiped him. We'll come back to that. Look at verse 10. Then Jesus said to them, do not be afraid. I love this. In fact, the way he says it is stop being afraid. That's the way you are right now. Stop being afraid. Spurgeon says they did fear, although the angel said fear not, because only Jesus can silence the fears of a trembling heart. Indeed, they were told not to fear, but they did. And seeing Jesus, when he says, do not fear, their response is worship. Worship. And I think this issue here of fear, why this fear? Well, I think it's the necessary dynamic of the creaturely apprehension of the divine. I think it's the necessary response of a creature before the holy. and especially for a sinner before the righteous one. And so Jesus says, go and tell my brothers to go to Galilee, and there they will see me. And I just love how the same message is given. There's an emphasis here on Galilee. We'll get to that. But I want you to see now one thing that's so, so sweet. The angel said, go tell what? The disciples. Jesus says, go tell my brothers. My brothers. Of all the things he could have said, he calls them brothers. He didn't call them deserters. He didn't call them deniers, weak. He didn't call them foolish or faithless or unbelieving. He said, they're my brothers. Where are they, by the way? They're not coming to a tomb. You think these ladies had fear? They had a different kind of fear, didn't they? A kind of fear that would keep them from coming to Christ. And yet Jesus still loves them and says, they're my brothers. My brothers. I'd love to take you to Matthew 12 and show you how Jesus talks about the dynamic of brother. Who are my brothers? Those who do the will of my Father. That's who, my family. So even though right now they're in the midst of despair, there's darkness, there's unbelief. Right now they're in pain and confusion. Right now they're in disobedience. They're not honoring. Yet they have been gripped by grace. And they are the brothers of Christ. And I think there's something more here. I think in essence, Jesus is actually saying something about his present state. As though he is very much flesh and bone, like a human brother. Like, for instance, in Romans chapter 8, verse 29, for those whom he foreknew, he also predestined. You notice the gripping of grace. Watch this. To be conformed to the image of his Son, in order that he might be the firstborn among many brethren. Among many brothers. So right there, Paul gives us a high theology that grabs brother and attaches it to the idea that Christ has risen from the grave in our likeness, and we will be in his likeness. There's something marvelous here. Ryle comments and says, there's something deeply touching in those simple words, my brethren. They deserve 1,000 thoughts, weak, frail, erring as the disciples were. Jesus still calls them his brethren. He comforts them as Joseph did his brothers when they sold him, saying, I am your brother Joseph. Much as they had come short of their profession, sadly, as they had yielded to the fear of man, they are still his brethren. Glorious as he himself is, Christ, glorious as he is in this moment, in this resurrected moment, he's the conqueror over death and hell and over the grave. He is the Son of God, and yet still meek and lowly of heart. Still, he calls them brethren. So we've seen already two beholds. Behold the empty tomb, and we've seen now, behold, the risen Jesus. Now look with me to behold the third, the hard hearts. Look at verse 11. While they were going, here attention is transferred in the text. It's directing the audience to see the women race away and to see Jesus connecting and commanding them to go. And we watch them move and run with great fear and joy. And at the same time, the camera then pans over and we see some Roman soldiers. So while the women were going, look at verse 11. While they were going, what? Behold. Behold. The third scene. Behold. Some of the guard went into the city and told the chief priests all that had taken place. Again, these men, here we are, Roman pagan men, unwitting witnesses, they become evangelists. They come and announce the good news. They come and declare that Jesus is risen from the dead. It's an amazing reality here. Now, it goes on. It says that they told the chief priests all that had taken place. Now, time out. Have you thought about that? We don't know if they saw Jesus. We know that they saw the angel. They saw the stone. And they saw an empty tomb. We know that they trembled and they were like dead men. So they came and they announced with fervor, I'm sure, and passion and confusion and excitement and fear, all that had happened, all that had happened. And yet they didn't believe. And they told the chief priests. And look at what it says the chief priests do. It says, when they had assembled with the elders and taken counsel. Okay, this is the scene. The soldiers come and say, look, you paid us to go out there on Roman authority to guard that tomb and make sure no one stole the body. We were there. No one could get by us. And I tell you, that stone was moved, and something, I have no idea what in the world, but it was sitting on that stone. It terrified us. We were paralyzed. Some of the guys are still back there with their eyes the size of quarters. And you, what is the deal here? What's going on? Who is this Jew? And they say, we need to huddle. They come around, gather up the boys. What are we going to do? And this is the thing you should be absolutely stunned by. They didn't contest the testimony. They didn't come back and say, oh, come on. Are you kidding me? Show me. No. They said, oh, our worst fears have happened. It's amazing because these men knew. They knew enough to say, we cannot deny that he died. We cannot deny that he was buried. And we cannot deny that there was a stone set. And we cannot deny that there was a seal set. And we cannot deny these Roman men who were there and now are here, trembling with fear in their eyes like we've never seen, telling us that he rose from the grave or that he's gone. Right here is where they make their decision. From the huddle they break and they decide that the almighty dollar will sway the people. And so they come and look what it says. They gave. Sufficient is, well, not the best translation. It's literally in the Greek a great amount. It's a considerable amount. It's an abundance, a large sum of money. They gave a lot of cash to these soldiers. And verse 13, and they told him this. Tell people this. His disciples came by night and stole him away while we were sleeping. You know what's striking? These men, they condemned Jesus for deceiving the people. That's what they said. And now they're deceiving the people. And they know it. And I find it not only absurd, ridiculous, incomprehensible, inconceivable, unfathomable. What in the world? Tell them you were sleeping. Tell them you were sleeping. Okay. You know, under Roman law, you could be put to death for sleeping when you're appointed as a guard. Just look it up. Acts chapter 12. Peter. An earthquake happens. Peter gets out. And guess what? Herod commands that the guards be killed. Notwithstanding that there was an earthquake. No, kill the guards. That's what the guards are there for. If they don't do their job, you take their life. In fact, that's not only found in Acts chapter 12, verse 18 and 19, but it's also found in the Digest 49, section 16 of Emperor Justin, who says that there were 18 offenses by which you could literally execute a Roman soldier. And one of those 18 offenses was falling asleep while he's guarding. No, these men wouldn't take that lightly. Spurgeon said it this way: a Roman soldier would have committed suicide sooner than confess that he had slept at his post of duty. There's something else to be added. There was a law that was made after this. It's interesting. It's written in the annals of time. Can't deny it. Because it's recorded as the Nazareth Inscription. Nazareth? Have you ever seen? Nazareth is a tiny little speck. How to get into the law of Rome. This is how. It's a law that forbids the molesting of graves, tampering with graves to steal the body or goods. And the law essentially says this: it's a serious offense and it's subject at all times to the death penalty. That became the famous Nazareth inscription under Caesar. Where do you think that might have come from? People molesting a grave and associating it with Nazareth. Well, look at verse 14. And if this comes to the governor's ears, we will satisfy him and keep you out of trouble. So they took the money and did as they were directed. Money, 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 money. Money will buy a betrayal and money will buy a bribe and keep the truth from you. It's a fascinating thing. Oh, men, don't worry. I know there's a death penalty if you tell Caesar you failed. If Pilate finds out, I know he could have your head. Don't worry about it. We have deep pockets. You just go on and tell everyone our lie as though it's true. We'll take care of Pilate. Apparently, he could be bought at a price too. Well, it's striking to me that the most pious paid pagans to lie for them. The most religious men are going to go to the world and say, we'll pay you to lie for us. And all their bribes, and all their lies, and all their silver coins could not alter the facts. Instead, it testified. It testified. It says there that the story has been spread among the Jews to this day. You know, the guilt of this is monstrous. That's what Matthew is trying to say. This is a monstrous guilt. Now, let me just bring some application here. If you were to look at the structure of this passage, you're going all the way back to 27, verse 57. You have Jesus dead and his burial. And that corresponds to the next section where he's alive and he's sovereign. And right in between that, you have guards posted in 27:62, and here, guards reporting, 28:11. And right in between that, so you have this chiasm. Jesus is dead. Over here, he's alive. Over here, he's being buried. Over here, he's reigning in commissioning. Right below that and in, you have guards being posted. Here, you have guards reporting. And right in the sweet middle is the resurrection. So the whole business is to point our hearts to the resurrection. This is why, beloved and friends, because the resurrection of Jesus is central to Christianity. In fact, it has been said that Christianity stands or falls on the resurrection of Jesus. And this is why. Because the gospel and Christianity itself is not built upon philosophy or morals or rituals or rites. It's not built upon ideologies, government, economics, or any other school of thought. Christianity is emphatically built upon historical fact. It's built upon history that is objective. But what do we care anymore? We live in a world that doesn't even understand the difference between objective and subjective. Because now we're calling people who are objectively one gender, you can say, that's subjective. You can be whatever you want to be. No, listen. A circle is a circle. A square is a square. That's objective. I don't care who you are. I don't care what you believe. A circle is a circle. A square is a square. That's objective. Now, you can say that's a pretty circle or an ugly circle. That's subjective. Go for it. This is the deal. Please follow my logic. What I'm trying to communicate to help us see something important. Christianity is not in the realm of aesthetics, whether you think it's attractive or not, whether you think it fits you or not, whether you think it's preferable or not, whether you think it's helpful or not. It's in the business of fact. Is it true or not? If it is true, it changes everything, regardless of how you feel. It changes everything. Here's the deal. Religion today is seen as nothing more than a system of morals and beliefs about things unprovable. You can take it or leave it. It doesn't really matter. In fact, in our area, the predominant worldview is atheism, at least in practice. What I prefer is to believe that I came from nothing, I go to nothing, therefore I am nothing. No wonder we have a crisis of dignity and meaning and the sanctity of life and purpose. We live in a world today that doesn't understand the basics of logic, of reality. We don't understand why there's a war in the Ukraine right now. We think if we just educate people, everything will be fine. If we just give them money or feed them, everything will be fine. No, we live in a world that misunderstands reality. To believe in what is not true, I'm going to say this very carefully, because I'm saying that Christianity calls you to believe something. But to believe in something that is not true is not winsome, and it is not good. It is destructive, it is delusional, it is harmful, it is bad. You are not being called to believe in something that is not true. The scriptures call you to believe in truth. Everything in this passage is screaming these things. I mean, why does objective truth matter? Why does it matter to you to demand that, no, I need objective truth when you're talking about your bank account? Why can't we be relative about our bank accounts? I'm going to go to the bank after church. No, it's closed. Well, I'll find somewhere open. And then I'll talk to them and say, no, I think I have like at least $200,000 in there. I know this is how I see it. So can you help me out? What are they going to do? They're going to laugh at you. But then those same people that will laugh at you, even people who would do something like that, will go off later and talk about things infinitely more important and say, oh, you know, it's the way I see it. What? You're going to be objective about a few pennies that are going to be gone tomorrow, and you won't labor to get a sense of reality for your soul, for living after death, for understanding what's beyond that veil that shuts you out. You will die. What will then happen? The issue is, are we objective? And who in the world can speak to us about the objectivity of life and death? Who? This chapter exists that you would trust in the words of Christ. Listen to J.C. Ryle. Never was there a fact which the friends of God were so slow to believe as the resurrection of Christ. Never was there a fact which the enemies of God were so anxious to disprove. And yet, in spite of the unbelief of friends and the enmity of foes, the fact was thoroughly established. It would be impossible to prove anything in the world if we refuse to believe that Jesus rose again. You see what he's saying? He goes, how can you believe anything to be objective fact if you don't believe this? The testimony is so thorough. Acts chapter 1, verse 3 opens up. Luke writing, he says, he presented himself alive to them after his suffering by many infallible proofs, evidences that convince a rational mind. The thing is, this resurrection of Jesus is too notorious to be denied. It's too widespread. And therefore, the burden of proof really lies on those who reject the evidence. The burden of proof certainly must be also something that Christians would bear, but the testimony written has already given testimony to it. Here's the deal. Christianity must provide reasonable evidence for its claims, but so should all unbelief. So I ask every skeptic mind, either by recording or in this room, where is your evidence for your objective reality? Where is the evidence of your hope? The goal of Christianity has that in mind. I want to run down. I know I'm out of time. That's nothing new. So I figured, why start something different? Let's just go with this. I'm going to run this down super quick. I want to just give you, again, a brief review of all the things that have been said about Jesus' resurrection, and not all of them, because we would be here a long, long time. So let's just look at a few. Here's one. It's a hoax, right? This is exactly what the Jewish leaders said. Oh, go tell everybody that the disciples stole him, and they made the story up, that he rose from the dead. That's a hoax. And well, we've already considered that they were in no state of mind to do that. In fact, no one was expecting resurrection. That's the whole point. The ladies came to the tomb with spices. They thought he was still dead, and they wanted to still entomb the body. They weren't expecting the living among the dead. Everything points in the opposite direction. The boys are hiding because they're terrified and they didn't expect a resurrection. Nobody here is expecting a resurrection. And by the way, what system of belief do you know that goes out and establishes itself on a capital lie in order to teach that you should never lie? Christianity says you should never lie. And they'll go to die for that. But you think they've started on a lie. Okay, yeah. Well, the other thought, in case you do believe that, you got to see the evidence that these disciples, they were all radically changed. Peter is in hiding after denying, and there's no resolution in Matthew yet. And so you're thinking, what in the world? And yet he comes out and he's the one who preaches. You men killed him. Even if you kill me. He's beaten multiple times, thrown in prison. He ends up being crucified, according to tradition, upside down. And he was like, bring it on, because I'm going to die for truth. Nobody dies for what they know is a lie. You can die for things imagined, but not invented. You didn't invent a lie and say, I'll die for that. Like, what good is that? So we know here, like Pascal said, I love this. Pascal said, I believe the witnesses that get their necks cut or their throats cut. That's who I believe in. I believe in witnesses who will die for what they witness. Well, that's all of the disciples. That's all of the apostles. And many, many thousands and even millions more. Well, that's number one. It's a hoax. No, it's not a hoax. Secondly, it's been argued that, well, the Jewish leaders may have stole the body. Wasn't that what Mary Magdalene said, according to John? You remember when she saw the empty tomb? Get this. She didn't believe in the resurrection when she saw the empty tomb. Instead, she ran away. She told the disciples, they stole the body. Now think about that. The Jews stole the body? Okay. Do you think they wanted to crush Christianity? What better way to crush Christianity than when Peter's out there preaching on Pentecost, go get a wheelbarrow, put the dead body in and roll it in the middle of the street and say, there's your Jesus. There's no resurrection. This is a hoax. Never once in history has the body been rendered. The third is, of course, the swoon theory. He didn't die. Well, he's lacerated, whipped multiple times, flogged, which kills most men. He's crucified, didn't sleep all night, went through a crazy 6-trial monkey kangaroo court. All the stress, all the loss of blood, and he didn't die. And if you think he just resuscitated, I don't think they would be grabbing his ankles to worship. I think they'd be trying to take him to help his wounds. I don't think he would say, go to Galilee, I'll walk 90 miles and I'll see you there. No, he didn't swoon. Or you got the confused tomb theory. We've already looked at that. The ladies were across the tomb. Not only that, the angel said, come and look. And they saw the grave close. Then you got the mistaken identity theory. This is number 5. This is what the Muslims teach today. No, the man that died on the cross was not Jesus. He just looked like Jesus. What? Okay. That's an absurd understanding of Roman protocol. You think the Romans just kill anybody who looks like somebody else? Or do you think that maybe they'd take serious jurisprudence in punishing the one who's positively identified? But let's go beyond that. So Rome made a mistake. All right. You think the Jews would allow that? Who's the ones that screamed, crucify him, and schemed it up so that he would be crucified and take Barabbas instead? They would know who that is. It's laughable to say it was a mistaken identity and that the man on the cross was not Jesus. No, it was Jesus, and he did die. So now popular on the internet is number 6. Well, Christianity is just copying the mystery religions. You see, other religions talked about God's dying and rising. You read that stuff? Listen. First and foremost, all the facts are wrong. I mean, that's a pretty large statement. Maybe not everything. But I got to tell you, most of the facts are absolutely wrong. Because while these stories deal with similarities of language, they do not deal with similarities of concept. The closest parallel that is attempted here is from Osiris, an Egyptian god who died and supposedly rose, but rose only to be king of the underworld. It's all spirit form, and it wasn't even a resurrection. It was an apparition, or you get resuscitation. The point is, there is no similarity in history of any other claim that the very same man who died rose again in a newness of bodily life. So in fact, Mettinger, a professor of Lund University, a specialist in ancient mystery religions, just a few years ago published this: the faith in the death and resurrection of Jesus retains its unique character in the history of religions. There is nothing that compares. All right, so number 7, some say, popular on the internet, they move the body. That's what it was. They got their facts wrong. The Jews would only move bodies 1 year after. You would never do it in a few days. They would move the bones into an ossuary and then store. This is emphatically untenable. You can't hold this as an argument. First of all, eventually the right body would be found when you go to identify. The Jews were meticulous to identify who was where. And a best account for the empty tomb could not be that they simply moved. But here's the deal. Listen. Even if we grant, okay, maybe they moved the body. Maybe they moved the body. What do you got? All you got is an excuse to try to explain away the empty tomb. You can't explain the risen Christ. So now what do you do with that? So here I give you the last thought. Some say it was a hallucination. Go to Luke chapter 24, John chapter 20, 1 Corinthians 15. You'll see all of those examples there where Jesus says, you think I'm a spirit? No, give me some food. I'll eat it right in front of you. Thomas, you deny? Come here, give me your hand. This isn't a hallucination. This is reality. It wasn't a hallucination. So the last argument I give is the church itself. Think of it. In a matter of just a few weeks, those who were screaming, crucify him, 3,000 lay their life down to say, I will follow, I will believe, I will repent and trust in a crucified Messiah. Within just a few weeks. You can't explain that by swoon theories. You can't explain that by moving bodies. The only way you can explain that is if he did appear to over 500 witnesses and the testimony took a rapid, explosive hold of society, and thousands of people in just weeks saw this is true. You don't get 11 fishermen radically transform the world. You don't revolutionize reality with stories. This took a hold and transformed everything. Christianity was not a movement. It was an event that was announced. It was an event that was announced. He was crucified and he rose from the dead, and I'm here to tell you about it. And thousands upon thousands of people gave their lives to the cause. This isn't a movement. It's not conjured up. These are historical realities. Now, I got to read these last few words, and I promise I'll land. Professor Thomas Arnold, he's the professor at Oxford University of History, and he wrote a 3-volume massive tome entitled The History of Rome. He writes this: I have been used for many years to study, a little bit of pride, that's okay. Here we go. It's not okay, but you got me. I have been used for many years to study the histories of other times and to examine and weigh the evidence of those who have written about them. And I know of no one fact in the history of mankind which has proved by better and fuller evidence of every sort to the understanding of a fair inquiry than the great sign which God has given us, that Christ died and rose again from the dead. Simon Greenleaf, Harvard law professor, world-renowned for his scruples in evidence and investigation. He writes this: it is impossible that the apostles could have persisted in affirming the truths they had narrated had not Jesus actually risen from the dead, and had they not known this fact as certainly as they knew any other fact. Sir Lionel Lockwood, 245 consecutive murder acquittals, a prominent British lawyer, writes this: I say unequivocally that the evidence for the resurrection of Jesus Christ is so overwhelming that it compels acceptance by proof, which leaves absolutely no room for doubt. Frank Morrison, a lawyer, also set out as an atheist to disprove Christianity, went to the Holy Land, investigated everything he could. He ends up coming back and writes a book, Who Moved the Stone, as now a testifying advocate of Christianity and the resurrection. Lee Strobel, a journalist from Yale Law School, writing for the Chicago Tribune. His wife comes to Christ. He goes out and sets an 18-month sabbatical to go to Israel and disprove the claims of Christianity. He comes back and writes the book, Case for Christ. You can go on and on. George Wallace writes Ben-Hur as he, during the Civil War, set out to disprove Christianity, and again wrote the greatest theater story, allegory, testifying to Christ. Or Lord Darling, and I'll use this as my last example, the Chief Justice of England wrote this: there exists such overwhelming evidence, positive and negative, factual and circumstantial, that no intelligent jury in the world could fail to bring in a verdict that the resurrection is true. Now, there are many facts that are irrelevant to you today, many of them. Like 1 times 10 to the 38th power is the 4th fundamental force in the universe. Who cares? Doesn't change what you're going to eat for lunch. But this fact changes everything. There are many facts you can know, you can believe or disbelieve, but this one fact changes everything. I've got to stop here. But I can't leave you with just that. I'm not even going to look at my notes. I want you to give me your attention, just these last sweet minute or two. All the evidence in the world would never change your heart. Because verse 11, verse 12, verse 13, verse 14, and verse 15 say we know the evidence, and we don't believe. So I can give you all the evidence. Satan knows more evidence than we know. And what's the end of it all? That all the evidence in the world would change your heart. And what's the end result? So you see Christ as Lord over all. So you do believe that he died in your place to take away your sin and its punishment. And so you trust in his atoning work. And you believe that he rose from the dead. And you believe that by it your life is forever changed, for you too will rise. And you will live forever in a new body with him. So you believe that. How do you respond today? How do we walk out? Let me tell you. Look with me at these words, verse 8. So they departed quickly from the tomb with fear and great joy. My prayer is that you would have fear and great joy, not so much stressing the difference, but the combination. He is holy, and that should enthrall you because he loves you. And last, when they saw him, the end of verse 9, they took hold of his feet and worshiped. I believe fear and great joy is the essence of worship. For you exist to fear God and to enjoy him. This passage exists so that you would trust in the words of Jesus, the testimony of his life, his death, his resurrection, that you would trust him today in life and tomorrow in death. Let us pray. Father, thank you for this time. Do what only you can and apply these truths to our hearts. We know that if the Spirit does not move, we are but dead men's bones. All the evidence in the world could only make us more guilty. It would never change our hearts. So, Father, we ask, change every heart that needs to be changed. And draw every heart that believes to fear you and to rejoice in you for your glory and their joy. Amen.